And there's other things. I mean, the consequential sort of utilitarian sort of view is quite interesting, because when it talks about maximizing utility, whether we take that to mean happiness, pleasure, well-being, etc., and minimizing bad consequences, well, it's really interesting, because you've got sort of immediate consequences, but you also got long-term consequences, and one of there's an unknowability to those. So if you've got things going on, like in situations in sort of the Netherlands and Belgium, where they've had euthanasia sort of legalized for a while now, and the sort of discussions they're having, because so say for us, so like if we say tomorrow they legalize euthanasia, okay, but a lot of people would have grown up in a cultural context where we would have known something different. Yeah, so we would have known that actually there are hospices, that dying with dignity doesn't have to mean getting sort of put down like a pet, a sick pet cat or dog or something like that. We would have known something different. But what's interesting, then have the next generation of people who come through who only know that. Yeah. Now it's really interesting looking at how that shapes the mind, because you might not know about what a hospice is. You might not know what other what dying with dignity could mean. You only know that when you get ill, whether you're dying, you start having conversations about a well-lived life. That you get to 60, you've lived well. There's a pretty good chance maybe you're going to get cancer or dementia or diabetes. You're going to need a hip transplant, things like that. Well, do you know what? I don't necessarily want to burden my family with me having to watch me die, and having to sell the house and put me in a nursing home. So why don't I just be euthanized? And that's the sort of discussions they're having now. So it's really interesting, and the children having these expectations, saying, well, yeah, I mean, you've lived well. Thanks, Nan, for not wanting to burden us with your suffering. Thank you for sparing us from that. And so you see the long-term consequences of that, and how they're playing out. I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's interesting about these. You've got those immediate consequences. Yeah, that individual can choose to die, but there are all the implications of and the discussions that develop from that a generation later. And it's going to be interesting where they're going. They're having some very interesting conversations, because why does it have to be terminal illness? Why does the suffering have to be terminal? Why can't, if you've got, certain mental illness that's making life difficult, you go blind in one eye, you have to have a leg or arm amputated, you can't, or you're in a wheelchair and you can't do the things you want to do. They're not terminal, but they do significantly affect your well-being. And so it's interesting, if it's just down to autonomy, why not use your autonomy to choose to be euthanized or put down for that kind of thing? So it's just interesting. I just thought the utilitarianism thing is just interesting, because I said there's short, medium, and long-term implications for that don't get factored into the sort of utilitarian calculus.
That must then also have implications of, on the other end of life, also impacts this conversation in some ways, just thinking of how we view disability. And I can't seem to separate the two in my own mind. Of if you are talking about disability as a life-ending scenario, no matter what the disability might be, if it changes your identity in such a way that you think ending life is the solution, then why at 60? Why not at 2? The lines of what and that's one of my issues of looking at ideas of utility and secular views of ethics. I really wrestle with that. I can't figure out that. All the lines just seem arbitrary to me.
Yeah, they are. Well, they're all linked. I mean, the way that you try and win the debate on euthanasia, trying to get it legal, is to focus on the fact you're only dealing with terminal illness, and you're trying to respect people's autonomy. Which, in a liberal democracy, sort of liberalism, we a key component of that is individual autonomy. And so if you focus on those things, that's how you get the door open. But actually the kind of the implications of that, then you start having to actually, well, why is it just those two things? I don't know what Gareth probably thought a lot about this, because this is your area. So otherwise I'll just jabber on.
Yeah, your area as well, Dan. But that's carry on the other end. But carry on, Gareth.
No, I agree. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, if it's purely about autonomy, and if that's the sort of determining ethic, then there's no logical basis for restricting it to terminal illness, as Dan says, restricting it to a competent adult, or the fact that it has to be voluntary, or it has to be, physician-assisted suicide rather than euthanasia. And in fact, in the Netherlands and Belgium, where euthanasia has been legal for a while, 16 to 18-year-olds can request euthanasia, and parents have to be consulted, but they can't veto.
Whoa.
And a parent or guardian with parental or guardian consent, children as young as 12 in the Netherlands can request euthanasia. A competent patient who's under 18 in Belgium can request euthanasia, provided they have parental consent and things like that. So, in some ways, say again? Sorry,
does that have to be a terminal? Do they have to prove how ill they are, or is that just, I need to end it?
So in Belgium, I don't think that, so competence has to be required, and it can't be for a psychiatric disorder, which might be, depression or, something like that. But there are increasing arguments about, particularly in the Netherlands, about this whole threshold, and where, if it's purely about autonomy and the right to self-governance, then this threshold about adulthood and competency and, the level of suffering or the kind of suffering, it can't hold. I have a friend who wrote her dissertation, at King's on a bill that was going through the Dutch Parliament on basically euthanasia for a completed life. In other words, you didn't have to be terminally ill. You didn't have to have anything necessarily wrong with you. All you had to do was feel that your life has reached its conclusion, even if, you still biologically could last 20, 30 years. That those could be legitimate grounds for euthanasia. Now, it's not legal itself, but it just shows you where this can go. And I know, like, a lot of secular ethicists hate slippery slope arguments, which is where we kind of are at the minute. But at the end of the day, there is evidence that some of these things do end up on a slippery slope. So.
Yeah, well, when there's clear evidence it's a slippery slope, it's pretty hard to deny it. So, I think 10 years ago that would have held more weight. People are, a lot of criticism of people saying it's a slippery slope. But when you keep hearing these advances and the door just opening wider and wider, it's very hard to interpret that as anything but a slippery slope, because this is exactly what we said. If you focus on individual autonomy and that and suffering, the natural progression is for always humans to push that door further and further, because there'll always be, you're not quite there, but you're close. Okay, well, once you've accepted that and you're a little bit closer, it's like, well, there's these other situations, there's other persons in this situation, and that's also okay. Well, let's allow for that, and it very quickly, the goalposts change. Well, not quickly, but I think. There's people with HIV diagnoses, people with cancer, people who've lost their sight, who've managed to get permission to be euthanized, and I don't know. I think we would all find that pretty horrific.